Hey everybody, the Turkey Boy Jr. back here in it again. Friction on MX Simulator. Literally the most important aspect to track making, the way a track feels, skill gap on a track, all that kind of stuff. It's all in the friction of the dirt, dog. I'm telling you. So I really had to come in here and make this video, and this video is really made for RF track makers, people that are just random custom track makers, people that don't really understand what's going on in the game. I feel like everybody really needs to realize this because it's something that I've really started to learn over the past, few years of this game. I've made 70 plus custom tracks in the game, obviously pro race for 4+ years, right? So I've tried to pinpoint what creates skill gap on a track, what makes a track feel a certain way, all these kind of things. I've really been thinking deeply about this, and the conclusion that I've come to is it's all in the friction of the dirt, man. That's everything. That's everything to everything when it comes to a track on MX Simulator. So let me try to, dig into this a little bit here. No pun intended. Let me try to explain a little bit of this here to some of you guys that don't really understand it, okay? So each one of these tracks has their own individual traction, right? Their own individual coding traction file in there where there's these selection of all these random numbers that, can change, like the roll, friction. There's like a selection of 5 or 6 different numbers that you can adjust, and that's what creates your actual traction in the game. So that's how you can get like slick tractions for mud. That's how you can get like concrete tractions for, road areas on the track and stuff like that. But that's all completely customizable within the track editor of the game. So my point being is it's not like this one set thing, right? It can be very, very different depending on what the track maker wants it to be, okay? But one thing you got to understand is there's a difference between a traction having friction and a traction having more traction. You understand what I'm saying? That's like two completely different things, right? You can have all the traction in the world, but then have low friction and it's going to feel a certain way. Or you can have no traction at all, but have all the friction in the world. A lot of times they do kind of tend to go hand in hand. A lot of times you do have higher tractions, more grippy tractions in the game come along with more friction to the dirt, right? And in a way, more friction does kind of create a little bit more of a traction in a certain sense, just simply because of the fact that when you have more friction, that's going to create more of a, I don't even really know how to explain that to you. You just kind of got to know the game. But one thing I really want to get across in this video is the higher you make the friction, the lower the skill gap you're going to have on the track. And I think this is the biggest problem with some of these modern day RF tracks. I think I've finally pinpointed it here. This is my biggest problem with the modern day RF tracks. They have too much friction on them. When you start getting too much friction on a track, what that does is it starts to limit the spectrum of throttle delivery that you're going to have on the bike to the dirt, right? So the more and the more friction you have, it kind of creates this feeling of the more and the more just wide open everywhere you are, right? It caps off your actual acceleration in a way. The more friction you make on the dirt, it starts to cap that acceleration. So then what that creates is it starts to give you a feeling of like I'm saying, you're kind of just on the throttle everywhere, right? And everybody just, it makes everything easier. It makes hitting jumps easier. It makes hitting whoops easier. It makes cornering easier. Everything's easier with more friction. And plus, also, you're going slower on the bike too, which then also lowers the skill gap as well, right? So it lowers the skill gap in every way, the more friction you make to a track. And basically the way it's always been in MX Simulator, they started back in 2011 with the pro tracks, right? Those tracks were super slick, slicker than snot, not a lot of friction at all, right? And then slowly but surely over the years, they've just gotten more friction. The tracks just started feeling better and better and better, right? The 2012s feel better than the 2011s. The 2013s feel better than the 2012s. The 2014s feel better than the 2013s, right? That's because of the tracks getting more and more friction, more and more traction, so you're not just sliding around all over the place. You can carry more speed around the track, all that kind of stuff, right? But I feel like they sort of hit the pinnacle of that whenever they got to the way the traction and the friction was to the dirt between like 2014 to 2017. I feel like that was their perfect prime traction years. And then after that, it's like they have tried to just make their friction more and more and more and more. And now we're to the point where they've got the friction at such a level that it doesn't even feel like the same game anymore, right? I feel like they've went too far. They've made too much friction. I don't know if they're trying to do that to try to limit you from hitting a big line. I don't know what they're doing exactly. I don't know if they're doing it for a road, because the road makes the track slicker in general when you have those little, micro eroded ruts on the track, right? It does make the track feel more slick. So I don't really know the reasoning per se behind why they're making so much more friction now, but that's why their tracks feel so basic nowadays. That's why their tracks feel so one line, so one rhythmed. You learn the track in literally the second lap on the track. That's why it feels like that, because there's so much goddamn friction on it, dog. I'm telling you, and I know this from experience with making my own custom tracks, because that's why a lot of my more old school style tracks were so difficult. A lot of you guys probably remember a bunch of my old school tracks so difficult. One of the biggest reasons is because they didn't have enough friction on them, right? When you don't have enough friction, what that does is it makes it to where there's so much more of a spectrum of speed and acceleration that you can get on a bike, which then therefore creates more of an ability to overjump something or underjump something. And the counterpart of that is, if you have too much friction, what that does is it completely eliminates that whole sort of like throttle control aspect of the game, right? It kind of eliminates that whole side of it. The game almost plays itself for you, right? Like the first official Monster Energy Supercross game, you know what I mean? You guys probably heard me kind of making that comparison with some of these modern day RF tracks that they've been making. That's what it is, man. That's why you can learn the track so quick. That's why the rhythms feel so like you're going to know the main rhythm that you're going to hit in the race almost instantaneously. There really is no, sure enough, like rhythm discovery or, finding some bigger rhythm that you're really going to hit in the race. There's just not much of that, because there's so much friction to the dirt that it doesn't really allow you to hit as many multiple lines as you would have hit and them actually be, fast and equal in speed as they would have been pre-2018, right? I feel like that's really when they made the big switch between like what I call like the perfect traction friction to this like built around a road, too much friction, all that kind of shit, right? So just in a nutshell, I think that's one of their biggest problems. Like if you took this 2021 Houston round one and you just slapped on the traction from, Anaheim 1 2017, this track would feel 3 times as good instantaneously, just from the friction. I mean, you could have made it maybe slightly more traction than it was, slightly more grippy than it was in Anaheim 117, but you definitely didn't need any more friction. It had a world of plenty of friction, right? It starts to give you this feeling like you're riding in heavy dirt on a lot of these modern day RF tracks. It's like they're trying to limit the power of the bike that you feel like you're not even actually on that fast of a bike in the game. And then you'll go ride on some JGMX track where he has proper traction, more like that 2017 style traction friction to the dirt. And it feels like you're actually riding like the normal acceleration and speed of the bike. And then you'll get on one of these new RF tracks and it's just like your power's just getting so robbed from you that it just feels like you're not even really riding a 450 anymore. So I'm just saying, if this is one of the biggest things I could pinpoint, obviously every aspect of the track minus the berms could be like, 10 to 15% bigger scaling wise to make it feel better. But of all the things, I think the traction, the frictions of the traction specifically, is one of their biggest things that is making the tracks feel so basic, one-to-one line, not as skill gapped as a 17 style track. That's what's doing it. And this is a big thing to learn if you're going in there making custom tracks. It's like, if you want to make your track easier and easier, then just raise the friction. But because it don't really matter what kind of jumps you have. I mean, it does to a certain extent, but I'm telling you, bro, if you have more and more friction, it's going to feel more and more like sand, right? And it's going to make the jumps feel more plush. It's going to make the corners more forgiving. You're not going to really like slide out in the corners. It's going to make, it's that whole like acceleration out of the corner skill gap, trying to get traction, but still being able to huck the bike and all that. That all comes from how much friction there is in the dirt. That's everything to it. So I just wanted to come here to make this video, kind of explain that a little bit. Some of you guys kind of, really explain to RF. That's what's causing their tracks to feel so weird now, to me personally. That's what's causing it to feel so, like, basic in a sense. And that's what's preventing you from hitting. I mean, there's a couple of areas where you can hit some stupid 1 in 20 lap quad, but it's not even worth it. And half the time, the bigger rhythms are not even faster than the smaller rhythms. And that's one really big issue. Shit, played the wrong one. Sorry. Let me go back to this 17 track here. I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. But, like right there on that Houston Round 1 2021, there's literally not even any quad rhythm on the entire track. I mean, you can hit one quad coming out of the first corner area on your very first lap, but I'm talking about normally riding laps on the track. There's not even really a quad anywhere on that track. Not a hittable quad, not a real hittable, something you're actually going to get, going to hit in the main event, right? You come around here, there's a bigger line there right off the jump, but then there's also a bigger line here when you're not coming around here on the first lap on this 17 track, right? So, you've got a triple, quad, double here, right? You've got multiple, I'm talking like 3 or 4 different potential quad rhythms you can hit down through this rhythm lane, right? There was just, I don't know, man. It's just hard to explain. And a lot of you guys don't even understand what I'm even talking about because you weren't really seriously playing this game pre-2018, on the 450 in the pro class. A lot of you guys that are still in the game now are either beginners, amateurs, or you just got into the game after they had started doing this higher friction thing and all the erode shit. So that's just normal to you. That's just the norm to you. You don't even remember how the friction and the feeling and the skill gap and all that shit was pre-2018. A lot of you boys, it's just like you don't even understand it. It's obvious why you have such a different opinion than me because you don't even understand it. More than half of you guys totally disagreeing with me. Here's this other quad on the normal lap, right? You can go double, triple, quad right here. You just can't do that in modern day RF tracks. You just can't. This right here, hitting a quad right here, like third jump of the rhythm, like you're just not going to do that at all in modern day RF track designs, period. It just felt like real dirt to me. I feel like this was the pinnacle era of their dirt filling. Like I'm saying, you can always raise or lower the actual grippiness of the traction to create more of either like a hard pack dry vibe or like a more prepped, normal brownie mix dirt vibe, but you don't ever want to get more friction to the dirt than you had right here in 2017. There is no reason to ever have more friction to this than this track right here at all, unless it's like a total sand track, like a total Southwick sand track. Then you can have a little more friction because it's actually sand. Or if you're trying to make like a super deep mud track or something, then yeah. But I'm talking about normal standard RF Supercross tracks should never have more friction than these 17 style tracks. Period. They just shouldn't. You're robbing the bike of so much power. You're killing all the skill gap to the jumping, throttle control, acceleration. Like, I'm telling you, man, this is the reason why those newer, I just am not feeling the vibe on those newer RF tracks. And, you know, you got to admit, I mean, 80 to 90% of the MX Simulator community is either A, a beginner, or B, an amateur, or C, a 250 pro, right? Or D, they didn't even play the game before 2018. So I really feel like there is actually somewhat of a small portion of the community that can even fathom what I'm even talking about right now, because they didn't even really play this game at the top 450 level back in this day. That's the biggest problem. The RF has been doing this new wave of super high friction for so long that people have forgotten how good this shit was. I'm telling you. Yeah, there's a few of you guys that still remember how this shit was. You know, but I think a lot of you guys, it's been so long since you've rode on these kind of tracks, you've kind of forgotten over time how much better this felt than a lot of the modern day super high friction tracks, right? Like, if you took this kind of friction and slapped it on like that modern day brownie mix looking dirt decal like they have on the 2021 Houston track, that shit would be awesome, bro. That shit would ride so well. But yeah, I just wanted to make this video just to explain my point of, like, I just feel like that's where they're going wrong right there. You know, it's almost like they can't even make multiple line options and multiple rhythms and shit because there's too much friction to the point where it don't even matter. You know, they've totally killed that throttle skill gap control to jump, how much throttle it takes to hit a jump, right? It's just totally killed that. And like gliding through a corner, I don't know. It's just, it's a very, very different thing nowadays. So either way, just wanted to come in here and kind of explain that. The more friction you make on a track on MX Simulator, the less and the less skill gap the track is going to have. So the less and the less friction you have, the faster and faster you're going to go, which is going to create bigger lines, more skill gap. But you got to remember, you can go too far with that to where it gets to the point where it's like almost impossible to accurately gauge and consistently hit a certain line because it's so low of friction that you just can't, you know, there's a fine balance between that. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. I feel like they hit the perfect note with the friction of the traction between 2014 and 2017 pro RF tracks in the game. And ever since then, after that, it's just been too much friction. So it's just oversimplified the whole thing. And you know, that really makes a big difference, man. It really does. So either way, hopefully one day they'll go more back to this style of friction. Like I say, you can do more or less traction. It's just got to have this kind of friction. That's the biggest part to it. I think that's the biggest thing that's killing them right now. Yeah, their tracks are a little bit, you know, cramped down scaling still, but their biggest thing really in a nutshell is too much friction to their traction, period. So either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes.